Okay. Ladies and gents, what's happening? My name is Nicolaou, and I'm back with another podcast episode of In the Chair with the Barber. I've been requested to do another story time episode, so I'm going to give 3 stories today of situations that went wrong for me. Some worse than others, depending on which way you want to look at it. The first one I'm going to give you is a story that happened to me in a barber shop while I was cutting somebody's hair. That went real wrong. The second story is a night out that I had, and something kicked off. A few younger friends of ours got started on. I went in to try and stop them from getting hurt, and I took a beating for it. And then the third one is a situation that happened with a girl, and all these years later, that's never not funny, but at the time, my luck was the worst. So the first story was before I was in my alpha male barbershop. I used to work for somebody else, and we're talking a lot of years ago. We're talking maybe three years ago. So it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we closed at 6. So the shop, the custom was steady at this point, and I was cutting an old guy's hair, and then Tom Small from Enjoy Barber Co. Shout out to Tom, because Tom's moral support meant the world to me that day, and I'll never forget him for that. So Tom was cutting someone's hair, I'm cutting someone's hair, and then there's 2 people waiting. And because he was an old guy, he was just having a scissor cut all over. This wouldn't have happened if I was using the clippers. And what happened was, my concentration must have slipped, and the guy's flinched. So I've looked at him through the mirror, and he seemed fine. And then I looked at my scissors, and you know when, if you're like cutting cucumber for salad or something, and then there's like a slice of cucumber on the knife, well, I looked at my scissors, and there was a slice of the guy's earlobe on my scissors, like a thin slice, but it was flesh. And I was like, fuck. So I kind of like hit it down, and just flung the piece of ear off onto the floor. So he didn't say anything, which was like, okay, did he feel it? Did he not? So I was going to kind of carry on, and then, because it didn't bleed straight away, so then it did start bleeding, and I'm like, shit. So I tried to style it out. I'm not someone that usually makes a fuss out of things, because sometimes if you make a fuss out of something with a customer, if you're working with the general public, sometimes it might not be a big deal, but they'll make a fuss out of it and play along with it because you made a fuss out of it, because then they know they've got you. So I didn't know how severe it was at the time, so I just tried to play it out. And then it started bleeding, so I panicked, and then I'm going to get tissue. I says to Tom, I was like, Tom, I've cut the guy's ear. Like, I whispered it, and he's gone, is it bad? I says, yeah. So he's like, fuck. So we come over, and the bottom of his ear was pouring with blood, like dark red blood. So I've got tissues, and I'm trying to like just stop the blood before I put a plaster on. And then bear in mind, you've got 2 people waiting, so they've seen what's happened. And then the shop that we used to work in was like floor to ceiling of windows on a big main road, real busy area. So I thought, the last thing I want is for more people to see what's happened. So I'm panicking. The old guy is like super chilled with it. and I went to get a plaster. I put the plaster on. The plaster wouldn't stick because there was still so much blood. Luckily for me, one of the guys waiting was a trainee paramedic. Um, so I asked him to help me. So we must have been holding tissue on this guy's ear for 15 minutes before it slowed down. And he was fine, which was like, if it was anybody else, I would have probably had to go to court for this. It was, it, I felt like I wanted the ground to swallow me up. It was hands down the worst experience I've ever had because the guy needed stitches, and no joke, honestly, like you couldn't make this up. His other ear, so I cut his right ear. His left ear was prosthetic, right? He had one good ear, and I fucking cut it. Um, so my my thought is that he must have a super high pain threshold. I don't know what the cause of him having a prosthetic ear was, but we'd seen him a few times, and he'd get his prosthetic ear changed. Sometimes it was like rubbery, sometimes it was hard plastic. The time during that incident, he had a hard plastic ear, and it was bolted. Imagine a proper bolts in his head. So he must have had a super high pain threshold, which is the only way I can think me cutting his other ear didn't bother him that much, because anybody else would have probably been in tears. And it got to the point where I finished his haircut off after managing to sum up the courage. Tom carried on cutting his customer. The other two guys were waiting for Tom anyway, which was lucky. And then I finished his haircut, refused to charge him. He refused to not pay. He was like, no, don't worry about it. Here's the money. And I never cut anybody else's hair that day because I just didn't have it in me. And I went home and really debated carrying on cutting hair, because that knocked all the confidence out of me. And yeah, Tom was like, look, whatever, so many people in the hair industry must have done it, maybe not to that extent, but that was, to this day, I don't think I'll ever come across anything worse while doing my job. So a big shout out to Tom. God bless that old man, he was a trooper. And the paramedic as well, who was there to help. So look, you can have bad days and you bounce back from them. The one thing I learned from that was everybody fucks up from time to time when you let your concentration slip. So when I'm cutting hair now, if I'm doing an all over scissor cut, when I get round the ears, I am fully in concentration, because I'll never let that happen again. So I learned from it. I'd rather have not been through that to learn from it, but there you go. The second story is a bad one, and so the person that requested I do this video today, he messaged me yesterday, says, when are we going to get another story time? I says, well, I don't really know. I don't know what stories to bring out. And he said, I says, give me some inspiration. He says to me, tell us about like something that scared you, something that hurt you, bring out something, people want to feel, see some of my vulnerability. I'm putting myself out there on this podcast, and I want to be able to give everybody the real me. It's not all about, doing well and success and the fun things in life. We've got to address the bad things that have an impact And this night in particular had a big impact on me. Um, it was about 2 years ago, and we're out in Cyprus for the summer, and we're in Ayanaba, or Ayanapa to the Brits, um, and there's a big group of us. Now the situation here is that the UK Cypriots, when we go over to Cyprus, we'll go to a lot of places and we'll all be together because there's so many of us. The problem with that is me being one of the older ones out of the group. I feel like I've got responsibility over the younger ones, even if I don't know them. If they're a part of the group, because I'm older, I feel like I've got responsibility. And one of the reasons why I don't really like clubbing anymore is because I can't really relax fully when I go out unless I'm in an environment or a club where we know we're being looked after. If anything bad's to happen, I feel obliged that I have to help. I'm not the kind of guy that's just gonna put my hands up and say it's got nothing to do with me. So we were at a bar. Then some of our lot had gone into Black and White. If you've been to Napa, you'll know the club. That was a spot we'd always go to. Now some of them are already in there, and some of the ones that are my age, the people I was closer to, and then the rest of us were going in. But I'm talking, there's like 50 of us. So I'm in the queue with some of the group, and then these British lads behind us pushed in, and then some of our younger lot pushed in the front. So the British lads didn't like it, so then they super aggressively started on the younger ones, but like they've pushed them. They've come out the queue and they've pushed these lads. And I saw fear in these kids. And it was 0 to 100 straight away. And our lot were 17, 18. These lads were probably mid-20s, 6 foot, 6.5 foot. Some of them had their tops off and they had big build. And our lot were kids, you know, and you could clearly see without knowing them that they were kids. So when the 2 or 3 of them got started on, it was by one guy in particular, but there was probably a group of like 8 guys. One of the lads was like, "Where's Ban?" Because bear in mind at this point, all the people of our group, I'm the oldest, and I'm the one with the martial arts experience. Now, I went over not to fight these guys off, but just to kind of get in the way, calm it down, and just say, "Look, they're kids. It's not a big deal. It doesn't need to be anything." So I got in the way, and hopefully to stop these kids getting hurt. Then the guy that started it was now in my face screaming abuse at me. And for those that haven't been there, the slope outside the club is like super steep. So I'm on the incline and he's on the decline. So on flat, this guy was a lot taller than me. On the slope, he was massive. And I'm being super chilled. I'm not arguing with him. I'm just kind of like letting him vent. Now, looking back, there's certain things maybe I could have done in hindsight, but in a situation when there's so much going on, you don't think like I could think now. You know, your mind goes from being this broad to like that. So, while he's screaming at me, I didn't think I should hit him because I knew that I'm with a bunch of kids and this guy's got another 7 of his friends that all seem game for a situation. So while I'm looking at this guy in front of me, I felt I felt a hit land about here, but I didn't see it coming. It was just a case of I'm watching this guy screaming, and then all of a sudden I've been knocked. But if I'd been hit once and then there was a pause, it would have given me chance to fight, hopefully fight back, because he didn't knock me down. But it wasn't just one hit, it was like non-stop. This is my face and I'm just being pounded. Um, so I couldn't even recover. And before he stopped, I felt somebody else's fist. So now I'm being hit by two guys. And there was shit going, there was so many people around. And bear in mind, you don't know who's with who. You don't know if anybody's carrying anything. There was definitely something in their system, whether it had been alcohol or drugs, because for them to be so aggressive when our lot had done nothing to them was definitely an indication of there's something in there that's caused it. So I don't know how, but I was stood there just taking the beating, and nothing had gone through my mind except don't go to the floor, because if you go to the floor they may kill you. So I just stayed on my feet for as long as I could, and I'm still being hit, but I don't know, I can't even see who's hitting me, because it's just like your head's just bouncing back. And I could hear people screaming, and I was really angry with myself because I couldn't fight back. And then what had happened was, I figured if I can run away and I can get some distance, then maybe I'll be able to fight them off. So what had happened was, I think at one stage I got hit with an uppercut, and I'd stumbled back, and luckily behind me there was a wall. So I fell back into the wall. I was still on my feet, and then I started running backwards, sidewards, to get away so I can get some distance. And then I've kind of tripped over this little dustbin. But at the time, in my head, I kept saying, Kyrie eleison, which is the Greek translation to Lord have mercy on me. I was praying because it was terrifying. I thought, when is this going to stop? Who's going to save me? Can I get out of this? In situations like this, you can look back and say, oh, it wasn't a big deal. But at the time, you don't know how bad it's going to escalate. And people die all the time from a physical altercation that may not have intended to be, murdering, killing somebody. But sometimes all it takes is a knockout punch, someone to hit their head on the floor, and it's all over. So you can never take that situation lightly. And so I'm praying to kind of just escape out of this situation. Okay. After saying Kyrie eleison maybe 2-3 times, I've got some distance. I look up, the punches have stopped. I don't even know who's hit me. But at this point, I'm pissed off, but I'm more concerned that the boys are okay, and so those girls there as well, amongst the group. And I felt that responsibility to make sure everybody else was all right. Luckily, some of the younger guys from our group, and people that I didn't even really know at the time, tried to fight some of the guys off. And I'll always appreciate that. But it was tough because there was so many things going on in my head, and I made sure that the kids were okay, and some of them had got hit, but all in all, I believe I'd got the worst of it. One of the boys got caught, but it was just because the guy had a ring on. But I tried to get all these boys to leave, and then it kept kind of starting and stopping, like all these arguments and pushing and shoving and whatever else. And then I heard one of the guys, one of our group, shout, for someone to go and get help. So one of the guys in the square who manages the bar, um, we know him. So one of the boys went and got him, and he got three of the guys that sell tickets for the club, and these three young African guys, and they started running up. But I didn't know that they worked for him. So I've seen these black guys run up, and some of the guys that were in that group against us were black. So I didn't know if these guys were together, and I was like, oh fuck. The last thing we need is another like group of them coming. Anyway, it turns out that they worked for the Greek guy in the square, and they had weapons. So some of them had these big party poppers, like these long cannon ones, and then I heard some bottles smash. One of our lot, told me that he'd seen one of the African guys get a bottle, and he'd scraped it across the wall to get a sharp edge. So that group that had attacked us, they got everything over their heads. They got the cannons, bottles. One of the guys told me that he thinks he saw one of the cut bottle go in somebody's side. But when they saw three guys, even though there was more of them, when they saw these three guys running at them, ready for a fight, for an altercation, these guys scattered. And it shows you how these guys were only tough when they're starting on people that are not looking for a situation, kids that are a lot younger than them, kids that are a lot smaller than them. As soon as the odds weren't maybe as in their favour as much, they left. And that cut our night short, but that fucked my head up for maybe 6 months, because I'd never been in this. I've been in fights before, but I'd never been in a situation when I've got beat. I've been hit, but I've never been beat like that. And it wasn't the beating that bothered me. It was more of the humiliation that I felt, because I've been doing martial arts for over 10 years, and I've got 3 black belts in jiu-jitsu, Kempo, Japanese jiu-jitsu, and I got my ass beat. And it's more ego than anything, I guess. I'm not a bragging type of guy, but if you've got a black belt, at least one black belt, people, or even if you just tell people that you do martial arts, people expect you to be invincible, and that's not the case. You know, you tell people you've got 3 black belts, they expect you to be able to stop bullets. You know, it's just all martial arts does is hopefully give you a better chance in a bad situation. And I don't just do martial arts for my sake. I do martial arts in case I need to help anybody else. And one thing I will say is that I'm loyal as fuck. Like I couldn't sit back and let that happen and not get involved. And I was glad I took the beating, more of the beating, so the kids didn't get it, because I just brushed it off. You know, I remember after it had all calmed down, I was more concerned that the kids were okay and for us to get out of there. The beating itself, the pain, I had no black eye, I had no broken nose, I had no cuts on me. They didn't knock me to the floor, they didn't knock me out. So I remember one of my friends, she came out because we messaged the group because they were asking where we were, the ones that were inside, and we said, look, we've been attacked and we ain't gonna come in. So they came out, and one of my friends, she says to me, what happened? She said, did anybody get hit? I says, I think I got the worst of it. She was like, you? She was like, you look fine. So I kind of brushed that off, but it was a psychological part that really played on me for so long. And I kept, probably over that 6 months, I kept replaying it back in my head. Why didn't I do this? What if I did that? if only this happened, or if only I stood this way, or if only I attacked the first guy before it even got going. Hindsight's a bitch, you know. It never goes the way you want it to go, and that night was absolutely terrifying, um, because it, if I had guys with me that were more my age, more ready for or willing for a scrap, um, and I wasn't concerned about having to look after the safety of these younger kids, um, I would have fought these guys back, even though I didn't know who it was that had hit me. Um, I would have gone for any of them. You know, we would have just taken it back to them. But it wasn't about me. Um, the main thing was that we could just get everybody out there safely and just call it a night. You know, sometimes you just got to take your losses. And um, I got 2 phone calls the next day. One was from uh, Dan, who is he started me off in jiu-jitsu. He was my brother's best man. He's like an older brother to me, and um, he's like a mentor of mine. You know, he's started me off in jiu-jitsu and all that. And he'd found out because he was in Cyprus at the time, and he told my older brother Mitch, who was in England, and Mitch had called me as well. And um, it was very them 2 phone calls really mattered to me at the time, because you needed that support again. Every time something bad happens, it's like you rely on some moral support to ease ease the kind of demons in your head that you're battling with. And they just said to me, look, you did your best, and shit happens, you know, but as long as you're all right. And that's all it was. But you can't help but expect more from yourself. And it was just one of them things where I learned some things at the time, but it was scary, because when I was driving back home that night, my younger brother Laz wasn't there. He was 16 at the time, and he'd been out in Napa 6 days in a row, 6 nights in a row. And that night, I remember him saying to me, "Do you know what? I'm a bit bored of it. I'm gonna stay in tonight and just chill." So people were like, and Laz, when I told him the next morning, he was like, "Oh, the one time I'm not there, this happens." So some people were saying that I was unlucky in that aspect, because Laz could knock a motherfucker out, you know, and I 100% believe Laz would have been there by my side and would have helped me fight them guys off. But I think by the grace of God, Laz wasn't there that night, because if he would have got stuck in for sure. But if he got hurt, it would have been a different story. And I realized that in moments of madness, you never know what you're capable of. And that night, Laz wasn't there, so I just these kids that got hit or that we were involved with, they weren't family to me. They're just boys that we're cool with, you know. And so I was there to protect them. But if it was my brother that had got hurt, I've always believed that there's a certain line that I would never cross physically in an altercation. But if my brother got hurt, I believe that there is no line anymore, because I was, you know, all my senses had been, um, like, just they were out the roof. You know, fear, panic, pain, ego, the feelings of danger and humiliation and resentment and panic and all these things. And you mix all that together, and I was still thinking, as long as the kids are okay, let's get the fuck out of here. But if my brother was there and he got hurt, I think I would have thought differently. I don't think I would have thought, okay, let's walk away. I would have, I believe that that night I would have wanted revenge. Um, Even though the three African guys came and got them back for us, I don't think that would have been enough for me. And Tupac, I remember while I was driving back home to the village, um, I remember this because I was thinking this, like, thank God Laz wasn't there. And um, I remember this line that Tupac said in a song came to my head, and I'd never known it to be more true. He said, "I ain't a killer, but don't push me." And I believe that in moments of madness, you just forget any kind, like, there is no sanity. You just, you'll switch, and you can cause absolute chaos and things that you may regret. And so I'm glad that for my sake, my own sake, um, he wasn't there that night, because I don't know how that story would have been otherwise. One of the other things that pissed me off was that it was in Cyprus and I got done by British lads. And I felt like they came on holiday and acted like they owned the place. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure I would have still been pissed off even if it was in England, but I just felt like we let them get away with it lightly. And I know that if I went back to the village and told a few people that I know that live there, the next day we could have gone back to Napa the next night with a car or 10 full of guys ready and willing, and uh, we could have ruined these guys' lives. And this was me thinking out of resentment. But sometimes you just got to leave it alone, because I'm not willing to let that hang over my conscience just for the sake of my ego. Sometimes you need to learn just to leave it alone, because it's not worth it. You just take your loss and you carry on. At the end of the day, God bless them. Like, I don't wish death or somebody being paralyzed just because of my ego. That's not what it's about. So sometimes you've just got to know what's worth it and what isn't, and act accordingly. It was done that night and we didn't need to go back, because again, am I willing to let that hang over me for the rest of my days? It's not what it's about. But I did learn some valuable lessons from it as well. You have to find the positives within the negatives. So there's a few, like, personal wins I took out of that. Like, one of them was that they didn't finish me. One of them was that they couldn't drop me. They didn't knock me out. I was still there. That was the first time I've ever taken a beating like that, and now I learned that I can take a beating. So that was a good thing, because until you take a beating, you never know if you can take one or not. And all them years of doing martial arts, you never know, because it's a fight or flight situation every time something kicks off. And some people will talk a big game, some people are act super tough, some people could have years and years of training, but they've never been in that situation where they need to stand their ground. And so some people will talk a big game and just expect that they will stand their ground, and there's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of people that back out. So even though I knew I'd get stuck in, you don't know whether you can handle it or not. So that was a good thing. And I remember a good friend of mine, Andrea, she was there at the time. She was in the queue waiting to go into the club as well, and she seen it all happen. I says to her, why wasn't I fighting back? My hands were down. Why weren't my hands up, protecting myself? She says, you were half trying to pull him in and half trying to push him off. She says, she said it was weird. She couldn't understand how I took such a beating and was still standing. And I took easily 10 clean shots in the face, and by two guys. And even though I couldn't fight back. Um, I was still there. And so one of the other things that I found was a positive was if it was one on one and I I didn't get the cheap shot and I saw it coming, maybe I would have got the better in the situation. So you've got to find positives in it, and it made me more prepared if something like that happens again. There's certain things I know to do and not to do in that situation, but you can't dwell on it. And these situations about survival, you never know. Sometimes people get into these situations and they don't go home. The reality was, you know, if a certain something happened, maybe I wouldn't have gone home. If I fell to the floor and they started kicking me in the head, this story wouldn't be told now. So um, you've got to take the little wins and forget the ego, because the psychological side stings more than the physical side, because the physical side I got over straight away. I had a few bruises that hurt for a few days, but that's it. I can't even remember the beating. I remember it happening, but I don't remember what it felt like. It it sounds a lot worse than it feels at the time because your adrenaline is through the roof. But it's a psychological side that lingers because your ego's been bruised. And I've never been one to brag about um, the martial arts and the black belts, but there's still ego there. And the one thing I will say is that anybody that saw it knew that I was there to protect people, and that was the best thing I could have done at the time. It is what it is, I guess. But it's okay to be scared in situations, because a lot of guys, this is a male mentality, and a lot of guys always talk about the glamour of, oh, this happened and I beat that guy and on this occasion, but people rarely tell you about the things that caught them off. I think that being open, this is a vulnerable side to me that I don't show usually, because you don't want to show it, but it's there, and it's there with everybody. But because guys don't show it so much, there's other guys that do feel it and feel that they shouldn't have it because they don't know other guys that have it. Everybody has it. It's just that people don't like to show weakness. And, you know, thanks to God, that night was minor to what it could have been. It was just me. I took it more personal than maybe I should have. But everybody's gonna go through times when they're scared. And the other thing that I learned from this is that if you hear about somebody committing a crime of some sort, if you hear about somebody committing a murder or or hurting somebody or something, and they're in prison or whatever it is, just hold back on the judgment, because you don't know why they did it. And like I said, in moments of madness, you don't know what extreme you're going to go to. And when you have a family or people that you really care about, or if you've got kids or your parents, your spouse, your partner, whoever it is, your siblings, and they are in physical danger, you're either going to run away or you're willing to put your life on the line to make sure that they are safe. And there's no words to really describe what that means. And so in the scenario where you are willing to put your own safety on the line to protect other people, you're also willing to sometimes go that extra mile to save them. And I learned that you should never judge. You should never judge people that go through moments of madness, because until you've been there in a situation that could be that severe, you'll never know how irrational you can think. And it may only last a couple of minutes, but in them couple of minutes, you know, a lot of bad can happen. But yeah, that's that. I'll I'll finish on a story to amuse you now. The third story is a story from a lot of years ago. Again, it was a summer story, and maybe one of the biggest fails to date. Um, so we were out one night in Cyprus, and it was the first year where my parents allowed me to stay at our house in Cyprus on my own. So I was there for 2 weeks, and the first week I was there, I was going to be on my own, and then the second week, my cousin George was coming over for a week. He was going to stay with me. So this one night, we're out on the Larnaca Strip, and a friend of mine, she introduces me and the group I was with. Like, so we're sitting kind of like by McDonald's, waiting to for the club to open so we can go in. So she knew this Cypriot girl from London, and she brings her over and she introduces us. All right, she looks nice. She had a fat ass. I was like, okay. So she told us that she dances. Now me, 17 years old, straight away, my mind's in the gutter. So, okay, I'm gonna have to get to know her. Later on, we go into the club. I bump into this girl. We start chatting a bit. You know, she's all smiley and the eye contact's there, and I'm picking up some signs. But I thought, right, you know, I've still got the rest of the holiday to work on this. You don't need to try and pull the trigger on it straight away. Whatever. So a few days later, a few nights later, we've gone to a pool party, a nighttime pool party, and it was at this. It was at a hotel. And so for all the Cypriots that are watching, the pool party was at Crown Resorts on the Gaya Road. So as we were, like, the party had finished, and then we're waiting for taxis. Bear in mind, at 17 years old, we weren't driving, so we're waiting for taxis, and me and my friends were going to go to back to the strip to like chill. That was like our after party spot. So I says to this girl, we're chatting, I says to her, look, if you want, me and my friends are going to go to Finiguez and chill, ice cream or whatever we was going to do. I said, so if you want, you and your friends can come with us. She says, oh, thanks, but we're going to have to go back because we live quite far away. She says, so we need to get back home. Okay, I says to her, where do you live? She says, I'm staying in Aradipo. No shit, well, me too. So now it's getting interesting, because I says to her, well, she says to me, whereabouts? I says, I live by the football stadium. She was like, oh, me too. So I'm like, all right, then give me your number, and then we can meet up sometime, like after the beach, you know, and chill. So so the day the next day, we're messaging, and I'm at the beach, she's at beach somewhere else. We're messaging, and we're messaging through the afternoon, and we said that we should meet up. Now I says to her, look, I've got a free house, so I'm kind of making my intentions. At 17 years old, there was definitely my intentions. I don't know if she had the same intentions, but she knew I had a free house and she was willing to come over and chill. So I don't know. But anyway, so she said to me, I've got a family meal at 7-8 o'clock, so it's got to be before that. Well, obviously I wanted a few hours to enjoy myself, so I was like, all right, after the beach, I'll go home, shower and whatever, and then we'll meet up. You come over. So I says to George, look, I've got this girl coming round. You're gonna have to disappear for a few hours. He was like, okay, cool. He says, I'll go to my auntie's. When you're done, you give me a call. We'll meet up. Okay. So she says to me, Ban, listen, this is the excuse I've had to tell my parents. She says to me, I've told my mum and dad that two of the Birmingham Cypriot girls are having a little get together at their house in the village, and they can't leave because they're hosting. So you're coming out to meet me, and you're going to walk me back to the house. So she was like, you're just going to have to kind of go along with it. I says, okay, cool. She says, because my mom wants to walk halfway so she can see whereabouts the house is, and then she'll go back and then we'll carry on. I says, okay then. So what I'll do is I'll meet you at the football stadium. All right then. So I had this planned out because oh gosh, in our house in Cyprus, there ain't much in there. It's a spacious house, but there ain't much. We didn't have like TV and stuff because we're only there for the summer, just for a holiday. You know, you go there to get changed and sleep and shower. So I couldn't really chill downstairs unless I'm going to chill in the kitchen, and what fun is that? So I had to have a plan of how to, you know, get her to my room. So I'm like, all right, what I'm going to do is I'll tell her to come upstairs and she can help me figure out what I should wear for when we go out tonight. I wasn't going out with her, just like with my friends, because girls like having opinions on outfits. So that was a plan of how I was going to get her upstairs. I I even went the extra mile. I slipped I slipped Jorex under the pillow. Fuck, I was prepared, super prepared, and I was like, all right, so I'll meet you at the football stadium. So me and George leave. I says we're leaving now, and George says to me, I'll come with you, and then when we meet her, then I'll just go to my auntie's from there. So we walked to the football stadium. I messaged her. I says, I'm here. She says, where are you? I says, I'm by the statues opposite the football stadium. She was like, all right then. Anyway, I can't see her. So she's messaging me. She was like, I'm by the statues. I was like, you're not, because I can't see her. So I says, come to the entrance. So I went to where the entrance was. She was like, all right. I says, where are you? She says, because I can't see anybody. I says, well, I can't see nobody either. So for like 5 minutes, we're walking around the stadium trying to find each other. And I didn't know this until that day. But I found out that there's two football stadiums in our village, and she was at the one and I was at the other one, and for that reason the opportunity was missed. It was one of them opportunities where it was like that was your only chance, and once it was gone, it was gone. And I was like, George, is there two, because George used to live there, right? So I said, George, is there two football stadiums in the village? He was like, yeah. I was like, fuck, imagine the biggest anticlimax. I had everything sorted. She was game, the house was free, she had an alibi, we're about to have a fun time, and then the only thing that stopped us, we were at two fucking separate stadiums, and none of us could drive for me to pick her up and get her to the house. And that was it, man. Missed opportunity, gone. What I learned from that is don't get your hopes up, because you never know, and maybe be a bit more prepared next time. So they were my three stories of fails. So it's nice that I can laugh about a few things looking back, but um, what I would say is always try and find the funny side or the positive sides to your failures, because you're going to get them, and some hurt more than others, you know, but we move. It's a part of life, and just try and better yourself every time so you can try and minimize them failures. But the reality is, you're never going to minimize them completely. But yeah, guys, I hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe and share. Sharing on your Instagram stories really helps get the word out. Um, I do appreciate everybody that supports it. You can listen on Spotify and iTunes and other audio platforms as well. The links to my socials will be there, and um, I'll be back with something else soon. So stay tuned, and you'll see me soon. Yeah.